Welcome to the Steps Collective on this Thursday lunchtime.
Yeah.
As always, we're going to read the words at some stage. I might read the words out first, but before I do, I'd like to thank Leo and Jessica for joining us.
Oh,
Um, Leo, we'll touch on this more in a minute, but invited Jessica and I to be part of a panel at the UCL Sustainability Leadership Conference back early summer. And it was really interesting things emerged. And we've called this retracing our steps, not because we're trying to do it word for word, but we're just going to say what happens if we take the same start points. How else might that conversation evolve, but within the Steps Collective setting? So first of all, for those of you who are new to the Sept Collective, welcome. We wrote these words and refined them over the years, just as a way of kind of like setting the scene for each of these sessions. Uh, Lizzie always invites people to close their eyes if they wish. You don't have to, but I will just read these out to set the tone, as it were. So, show the easy place to start. As we navigate these transitional times and traverse the emerging regenerative territory, we commonly find that there is not always an obvious path to follow. With many questions to navigate, yet no single answer to guide us, we look for the footprints of others to consider where we might take our next steps. However, even the most experienced travellers in these spaces would admit that they are continually finding their way, unsure of what is around the next bend or over the next peak. This is an ongoing dance with uncertainty, switching between action and inspiration, acting before we think too much, and thinking before we go too far. So, although taking the next or first step can often feel like the hardest, know that you are not walking alone. Whether or not your own trail will become a valuable path for others doesn't matter. We help each other towards a regenerative tomorrow, not as experts, but as parents, neighbours, colleagues, and citizens. With that, Leo, you led us to East London. Why did you lead Jessica
yeah.
and I to faraway East London?
Hi, everyone. And it is, UCL has a campus. Many of you might think of UCL, if you know London, as being sort of Bloomsbury, but they also have a gigantic campus out east, um, Stratford. So they had a huge event. And they're really good. UCL are really good at doing this. They bring lots of people in, and they're really firing up the students there. I think getting them geared up for being the next generation of people that will drive the change that we're all involved in now, right? So, and I guess I have a question that I don't have an answer to. Although Jessica and John gave me some really interesting pointers, and I think you might enjoy going through hearing some of that today, and that's why I thought it was worth doing. The question I had was about there's something in this regenerative thing, and there's something in the idea of designing regenerative businesses. But which are they? Who's done it? What are they like? What does it mean? How does it work? So for me, it's like an inquiry rather than an answer. So hopefully we can be open over lunch and our minds can expand and we can explore that a little bit and see where it goes. I then wrote a short post summarizing the event, and I'll tell you that of all the posts I did this year, it was one of the ones that got the highest levels of engagement on LinkedIn. Like it's like huge, which really sort of surprised me. And one of the things I wrote in that post, and it feels a bit poignant now, as I opened it with a sentence: sustainability feels broken, politicized, and devalued. And that was before Trump stood in front of the UN and called it a con, or called climate change a con this week, which I managed to not watch the news for 24 hours just to stay out of it so I wouldn't get sucked into a negative doom spiral. But I think there's something in that, which is that we're trying to sustain a system that is already in collapse, actually, I would argue. So what if, instead of designing businesses and organizations to could you design companies or organizations that would actively heal rather than just do no harm, the kind of old way of thinking. And so that was the theme for the event: designing regenerative businesses. And I was lucky to bump into Jessica Ferrow, who maybe you should introduce yourself, Jessica, and John as well, in case people don't necessarily know you. But both of you brought this amazing kind of perspective. So why don't you do that, a quick intro into you two, and then we can just get into some of the things that we remember and thought were really interesting starting points. The good news for everyone who's come to this during lunchtime is we can do away with the kind of stuff that was the warm up and get straight to the meat of it, as it were. because it's like a new and improved rerun, basically. Jessica, tell us a bit about you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Ferrow, and apologies because I'm just getting over a cold. My daughter went to nursery and brought me back a nice cold, so thanks for that. So I have been working in the field of sustainability for about 15 years. I have my own business called 12, which is a consultancy, and we work with purpose-led brands to help them on their sustainability journeys. So we help them with sustainability strategy, communications, and also B Corp certification. 12 is a certified B Corp as well. And I've been working in this sustainability space for for all this time. And I've seen the way that it's changed on the agenda, and when it used to be all about, recycling bins and LED lights. And then people, learn about scope 3 emissions, and, it's become a lot of a bigger thing. And yeah, the world's just got a lot more complex, and the world of sustainability's got a lot more complex. There's been a lot more recently regulation that's come in as well and changing the industry a lot. So, and I also have just been coming at it from someone who is uh yeah, getting quite jaded with the world, as Leo describes it. The way that, yeah, the collapse is here, but we still don't seem to be acting enough. And actually, the business 12, we founded it, my co-founder and I founded it in 2018 when we read the IPCC report that said we had 12 years to avert climate catastrophe, which is why we called our business 12. But since then, there's been like many, many, many more reports that have kind of over superseded that. So people are always like, have you changed the name of your business to like 7 or 6 or 5? No, we do have a low ticks down though. But anyway, it's yeah, I'm just someone who is in this space and also seeing, whilst really wanting to make an impact and do good, I'm also seeing just the limitations of the business as usual that we're so often operating in. And as someone who is always looking for new things and my growth edges and the growth mindset, I'm always asking, what else can we do? And in 2020, I trained as a nature facilitator because I realized that really we need to be going into nature to have these discussions and conversations. We can't fix nature, or like we can't fix nature anyway, because who are we to fix nature? We are nature. But we can't really have a lot of these discussions about saving the planet from within a four walls in a windowless boardrooms, which we often are doing. So yeah, I really like bringing people out into nature to have those transformative discussions. And more I'm looking for ways to do that and live more regeneratively myself and explore different models and frameworks that allow us to do that. So that's where I come from, and I'm really excited to be here and talk with you today. And thanks for inviting me, Leo and John.
Amazing. John, I don't know whether everyone knows, most people might know you, but I don't know whether you want to do a mini précis of what you're up to.
I'll do a mini version of maybe the thing that we did in the original thing. So my John are on a strategic design practice called Smithery. And essentially my interest in the regenerative space came from doing a UNDP Futures project a few years ago. And just got one of the byproducts of doing a futures project with UNDP is just lots of signals that make you, I think, to reinforce what Jessica and Leo described, existentially challenged in a way. You're going, oh, there's so many different things that we all need to apply ourselves to. The thing that I kind of zeroed in on was this idea of sort of like rigid, the language of we need to move beyond sustainability to become regenerative. For me, is both, well, it's either a spatial or a temporal metaphor. It's like we go to one place first and then the next, or we do one thing first and then the other. And I've just been taken over these last couple of years of just going, they're not necessarily in the same direction. The sustaining of the current models, the sustainability perspective, is not necessarily the way for every company or every industry or every country, where you would say, oh, well, we'll just sustain this and then we will become regenerative. It might actively prevent people becoming regenerative. So, how might we start having conversations that just help that? The Steps Collective is part of that. So, myself and Lizzie and Esther and Andy and Rob decided to convene little meetings like this, which are in essence to not fall down, and I wrote this down as Jessica was speaking, not fall down the industrial climate report complex of here's another sort of like 67 points checklist that you must do in your business to be able to do these things and so on. Much more interested than just getting people talking and sharing and exploring so that everyone walks away with something going, well, I might not be able to do that within the whole business all at the same time, but maybe I could change that or try that or talk to these people and just change things as we go. So that's me, Leo.
I love it. So maybe we should talk about what regenerative is, because I don't really want to spend hours discussing it, but I don't know what it is properly unless I do put it out there. Maybe we, people talk about these things without necessarily defining them, and I think that might be messy. Is it as simple as it's not about sustaining, it's about healing, repairing, and renewing, and leaving the world in a better place? Is it something like that? What is it?
I think it is those things, and from my perspective, it's working how nature works, which is basically creating the conditions that are conducive to life. I think we have, working as we do in this kind of modern world, this modern world that we live in, a lot of the time we're not working in ways that are conducive to life. So we're trying to solve these problems from a place where the conditions are not conducive to life. We're burned out, we're overworked, a lot of the time, there's people are struggling to make ends meet financially. We have, obviously the destruction of the biosphere, all of these things that are happening. It's just kind of out of whack, isn't it? So I think we're starting from a difficult place. And even our mindset is influenced by that and our environment.
Yeah, I mean, John, you probably want to comment on it, but it really struck me when we spoke last time was this mirror. Because I hadn't walked into the conversation with you two thinking I'd ever get here, which I guess shows my narrow-mindedness, so apologies. But this mirror between how can you regenerate the world if you can't, you've got to start with yourself. And if your own self is sick and ill and unhappy and unwell and stressed and anxious and tired and doing things in a way that's not positive for you, then could you ever hope to really do that and your nature? Could you ever hope to do that for anyone else in an effective way? I hadn't expected to go there, but that's something that came up quite early in the conversation. I was quite surprised by it. So talk to me a bit about that.
Me or John?
Either. Yeah, either.
Well, no, go Jessica.
We're just, I think, working in sustainability, and I'm a consultant and I work with brands and I'm seeing them, they have these sustainability strategies and these carbon targets, and they're saying, we need to do this. We need to fix this. We need to hit these carbon targets. Oh, they look impossible, but how do we even do that? But it's all very linear, it's all very heady, and it's all really like we're trying to solve these problems. We're trying to like think our way out of these issues when actually there's such a deeper existential thing that we need to address in order to get anywhere close to where we need to get. So I think there are ways that we can, our heads can take us so far, but I think a lot of the work that I've been doing personally over the last kind of 5 years or so is just really kind of try and bring my whole self into the discussion and my whole heart, and as a human and not as a head trying to solve a thing. And I think, I am quite good at fixing things. I am quite good at fixing problems, but that only takes us so far. And I think, we really need to be thinking about what's the actual world that we're trying to create and how can we start living that today? Because we're living in these degenerative systems. And I think we sometimes think that we can't get to where we want to get to, but a lot of the times we can already do a lot of the things. I mean, John just talked about how he grew his own potato that he ate for lunch, and there are things we can do already, and it's not like this mythical future which is like in the future. It's like a lot of the things exist already, so it's like, how can we actually just be midwifing those things into existence more? Is that two loops model, the idea that there's the things that we need to hospice, the old normal we need to hospice. At the same time, there's the emergent future we need to kind of midwife into existence. And I feel like I've kind of gone from being very much in the hospicing, like fixing, like being in the fixing mode of like, oh, the thing's all broken, the Titanic's sinking, let's fix it. And then I'm like, actually, do I want to fix it or do I just want to be in the fields like growing the new thing? Because that actually feels like a nicer place to be.
Yeah.
We need both, right? But I think it's just kind of understanding where you are on that. And if you are dancing between the two, or are you right in the middle? And then like what is the most supportive? Because I've seen some beautiful examples of regeneration already happening, you know. You go to certain events or places and
Give
it's
me an
kind of like
example. Give me a tangible. Give me a tangible. Give us
Medicine
the.
Festival. I don't know if you've ever been to Medicine Festival, but it's like I mean it actually seems wrong to call it a festival because it's not really a festival, but it's like everything about it's beautiful, and it's like it's held in Wasing Estate, and they didn't do it this year because they had a fallow year because they were burned out as organizers. You know, they were like let's just like have a fallow year because we need a rest, like nature needs a rest, and but everything's just so beautiful, like all of the food, you know, it's not just like go to a food truck, it's like everything's like regeneratively grown vegetables and like there's no alcohol and drugs and everyone's just communicating on like a much more conscious level, you know. It's kind of like the level of conversations and the level of workshops are so advanced of what humanity could be thinking about and doing. It just feels like there already are so many ideas out there that are not mostly in the mainstream discussions. That's just
John, yeah, it's good. John, have you got stuff that you might draw on as practical or tangible examples, or you can tell us about your local neighborhood? Because last time I thought that was really interesting.
So I mean, to touch on what Jessica was describing there, though, is, and I think this is in part the unexpected thing for us, maybe us all at the beginning of sort of like we're going to get down to much smaller things. So suddenly we're going to stop talking about the scale of like fixing companies and industries and so on. And I just noted down there, just like to almost to map to Jessica's creating the conditions that are conducive for life. There's something in this for me, which is when you come down to those smaller scales, be it individual or family or neighborhood or village or town, whatever else, you can start growing intent. And the thing if you can start sort of like talking to people about these things and just say, how might we do smaller things? You can start to kind of like to grow intent in smaller circles, which then become a little bigger and then become a little bigger. And suddenly you bump into other people who've got not the same intent, but similar. And so I wonder if over time what you get from that is suddenly the expectations that lots of small groups have of the world is the thing that changes how larger entities engage with it and entertain what
Yeah.
should we do next? Where is that? So it's the solving it all at once um, feels really hard. And so maybe and maybe that's to the point of Jessica's thing about the carbon targets. It's kind of like these are all top-down policy, intergovernmental attempts to solve it all at once. When really you go, how do we all solve little bits? And it doesn't all have to be in the same way. It can just be by bringing people into other ways of thinking about the world or finding new ways of thinking about the world for themselves. So to your point about the nature group. So, and some people in this group know this story, but not everyone, so I'll tell it. Essentially, we moved into this is our new build house. It was built 9 years ago. And my friend Rob, who's a fellow steward of the Steps Collective, had worked on this project called My Nature Watch camera at the RCA in Goldsmiths. And essentially, it was a build your own nature camera, right? Just a trick. Rather than sort of like spend £120 on one, it's basically here's a cheap 30 quid box, and you can make one, put it in a Tupperware box, and put it outside, and you will see nature, which was super interesting because it was exactly the right sort of project for me because that's the sort of thing I love. My son was 8 at the time, so it was like, oh well, we'll do it together. So we put the camera out, and it wasn't working. So we brought it back inside. And went, oh, that's weird. Why is this not working? We tested it. Oh, it does. Like, if you wave a hand in front of it, it does set off this stuff. And we realised there was no birds here
Yeah.
because it was a new build estate, and the whole estate had basically been scoured and scraped of nature before anything could any of the houses were built. So we set about rewilding our own garden. which we did successfully, and there was birds and so on. But the more interesting part of that is our neighbour at the time, Vicky next door, also put a bird box up because suddenly it was something we had in common. Like we're not the same. We work in different places, different industries, whatever else. But the sort of was like, oh, we can align around nature. So she put up a bird box. Blue ticks went nuts. So we had a conversation point. She actually moved with her family further down the estate, put up a new bird box last year, and I was like, oh, set up a WhatsApp thing and just send me pictures of the birds. And on day one, it was me, Vicky, her friend Hannah, who happened to be passing, and my wife Helen. By the end of the week, there was 8 people on the group, and by the end of the month, there was 12 people. And there's now like 75 people on the group, of 220 out of 220 houses. But it's just suddenly there's this collective sense of stewardship of the expectations we have of not just individual gardens, but the green spaces in between. But then other people going, oh, we could connect to this other nature group that's across the village and such. Oh, we could do this and whatever else. So suddenly, by doing these small things, suddenly you're growing intent all over the place. It's not, everyone has lots of different ideas and they have different bits of nature they appreciate more. So it's not the top-down instructional, everyone must do this thing, but there's this growing intent of this is what we expect from local councils, housing estate management companies, gardeners who kind of like operate on the thing. And it's just sort of like you start. I always struggle a little about sort of like going, oh, but this thing seems really small when you describe it and so on. And you go, yeah, but I can point you to lots of other things in different places around where I live. And I'm sure you can all point me to things that are happening around you live. And if we all tallied all of the things up that were happening, what would be the size of this intent?
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
really
that's
like that, John, and I think it's like the mycelial network rather than the big intervention at the top. And it's that thing of like, oh, the world's got, the globalized world. It's assuming, or it's kind of forcing this homogenization across the world, or it's assuming that things are the same in everywhere, whereas actually the diversity is what's needed for nature to thrive and for our cultures to thrive. So like diversity in an ecosystem is a sign of health, but we've like globalized is like
Hmm.
homogenized everything. So it's basically the opposite of what's required for a thriving system. And so I think this kind of yearning that I think I feel, and I think that's shared by many people, is just this yearning for like a relocalization and a re-engaging with the local things around me that I can see and touch and the people that I can talk to, feels really important at this point, because it's like that's where I can see that I'm having an impact. When I can feel really overwhelmed by all the things that are happening in the world right now. I mean, the many, many, many things that are happening in the world right now that I have no power over. The things that I do have power over are the things that are closer to home. And I think still we're not really, a lot of us have kind of forgotten that. And I think there's the even since the pandemic, right? We all went on to hybrid working and working from home and remote working, which in many ways is an amazing thing. But then now a lot of us are kind of living in these communities where we're not engaging with them as a member, as an active member of a physical community anymore. And we've kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater. I think a lot of us feeling like we're like, where's the people? Like, I know I certainly feel like there's something lacking that I can't quite put my finger on it, but I think it is just that, community.
Hmm.
So I think that feels really critical to this regenerative piece, because it's like we're not we can't work as like individual entities. We need to have the whole support system, the mycelial network, all the symbiotic relationships with the other members of the ecosystem.
And that's
Yeah.
that reminds me of, so there's another nature project nearby. It's an apple project. There's an old community orchard next to what was a council estate, and it still has a mix of kind of like council, private, and social housing. Um, but so a group had basically and started. Well, we are now the new Friends of Scrace Valley Orchard, and it's basically I don't know about 40 trees of various different ages that's been there for a while. But the interesting thing is giving people local to it back some agency to go that these are your or this is your apples, this is your orchard. You are allowed to come in here, pick apples, do things, and so on. It's not this, and all of the apples are different as well, which is makes it even weirder and stranger because it's kind of like it's not like somebody's just repeated the same tree 40 times. There's at least 25 varieties of apples down there, plus pears, and they're all ready at different times and taste different and can do different things with them and so on. But it's just, I feel in modernity has robbed people of a sense of that kind of like local agency for a community. You go,
Mm.
this is yours. This is kind of like, this is here. It's all going to drop to the ground and go to waste again. But it just takes a few people to turn around and go, oh, well, we went down. So the thing we did a couple of weeks ago, so like, we went down, we picked four big trays of apples and put them in front of local food bank but made sure people knew they came from that orchard. So it's just doing little things like that to go sort of like, oh, so this is free, but I could just go and get it fresh and free from here should I want to. But it's that, and I think it comes back to Leo's question about the definition of the regenerative. There's some that I got into the RSA articulation of the kind of like the economic and the social and the environmental. It has to be all three of those things to be regenerative, to my mind. It has to be, yes, environmentally regenerative, conducive to creating life for nature, but it has to have the social element for people to kind of like to grow and appreciate it. But it also has to have some form of economic, and not just a financialization, but a sense of this is how it fits within a local, a regional, a national, and international economy so that it keeps going and it grows
That's
and
interesting
more
because
of it grows.
I mean, we've been talking to, although not working with, a nature tech business, UK-based nature tech business recently, mainly about helping them get their story straight and find a way to articulate what they're about and why they're worth kind of working alongside. But one of the things that they talked about is they're involved in big rewilding or restore nature restoration projects on land in Scotland is a big part of what
Mm.
everyone else seems to do. You know, and they go in and they assess the topography of a landscape and they look at land use and they understand what licenses are allowed for which bits of land to do what, and then they kind of restore old woodland, and it takes 100 years ROI, and it's kind of amazing. But one of the things, so that would look, I suppose, like an act of regeneration. But one of the things that they've been talking about is how if you ignore the social slash human side of that job, what you don't see is that you've just put all the people that used to run a shoot for a load of poshos from London coming up out of work because they can't do the thing they used to do. Let's say they can't do it anymore. It's not run as a kind of pheasant shoot anymore or something like that. And so does that preclude it being truly regenerative if you're, because I guess if humans are part of nature, then you're not doing a full job for the whole of nature, you're only doing part of it. It's interesting that we have to fit, that we're allowed to be part of regeneration. We're not, we're not separate from it. I don't know whether that makes any sense to anybody at all.
Yeah, it
For
does
me,
me.
maybe you lot all understand it. I'm just the last one to get there. So apologies.
Jessica, do you want to come in on that?
Well, yeah, we are nature. So there's this thing of like, talking about we need to reconnect with nature, but we are nature, and we're an expression of it, and it's kind of actually taking our place more in that system rather than seeing ourselves as separate from it. And I think that's why I really love the whole like designing with natural cycles thing. And this is what I'm really interested in. One of my favorite framework. And I thanks Pins for sharing the regenerative framework in the chat, which I really yeah. So like, has anyone heard of the John Young 8 Shields model?
No.
So basically, so there's this wilderness tracker called John Young, and he's American, and he grew up in California, and well, actually, I don't know if he grew up in California. He lives there now, but he basically, when he was a young boy, he literally was like standing on a street corner, and then this guy started talking to him, and was basically really impressed because he already had a lot of knowledge. This 7-year-old kid already had a lot of knowledge about nature tracking. Because his grandmothers had taught him a lot, because both of his grandmothers lived on farms, and they taught him a lot about how to read the bird language and track animals and just everything to do with plants and how to name them and all these different things. And this guy who met him just realized that he had all this knowledge and was like, wow, you know a lot. And this guy had been I don't think he was indigenous himself, but he was North American and he spent a lot of time with indigenous communities and knew a huge amount about nature. And so basically this guy like took John Young under his wing as an apprentice him. He mentored him for like his whole life, basically. And he was always pushing him to try and, you know, learn more and more about nature. So he became this incredible nature connection. He just has incredible connection with nature. And he did a lot of work with connecting people with nature, adults and children. And he had this thing called the Wilderness Tracker School. And he's basically done a lot of work with nature connection. And through this, he developed a framework called the 8 Shields. But this was based on indigenous wisdom as well, from many different people inputting into this model. But it was what indigenous people already know around the world in lots of different communities. And that's that the cycles in life in many different ways follows the same exact patterns. Okay. And if I can actually share my screen, you see that? So you've got like, this is the kind of day cycle, right? So you've got sunrise through to sunset and midnight, right? So if you imagine this is the track of the sun going through the sky and the energy of that particular time of day, that archetypal energy of the different types of day. So at sunrise, you've got this moment of, you know, it's been dark and then suddenly the light comes and then the birds are singing and it's kind of this quiet moment of awe and reverence. And then, you know, as the morning goes on, there's lots of activity. The birds are flying around and getting their food. And in a human community, you know, that would be when we're all waking up, getting our coffees, getting going, and there's a lot of energy. Think like Waterloo Station at 8:30 in the morning kind of thing. It's the same as like in the animal kingdom, you know, people are getting up and getting on with their day. And at midday, we're all in we're all in our work, like whether we're animals or humans, we're kind of doing the thing of the day, right? We're in meetings or we're working in the fields or doing whatever we're doing, and the animals are doing whatever they're doing. And in the early afternoon, then we have this kind of rest, maybe, or like there's a slump, you know, the post-lunch slump, which we're kind of almost in now, maybe. Siesta time. Lots of human communities do a siesta around this time. And animals as well, they rest. And then sunset is like we all go home from where we've been and we gather together. And in hunter-gatherer societies, we would gather around the fire, we would have told stories of the day, what we've been doing in the day, everyone's been out, now we're all together. Or, you know, we sit around dinner tables today, don't we? You know, talk to our families, talk to whoever it is, and we gather and we share stories. In the same way, the birds come home to roost as well. And then the twilight time is this kind of time of reflection. Just before we go to bed, we're getting ready for bed. It's quiet, you know, as the sun's setting. And then midnight, we're usually asleep, and that's a time of deep rest and stillness. And then the pre-dawn is that kind of, is it night, is it day? It's just before, is it the end of one day or the beginning of the next? There's this kind of mystery there. So what John Young realized is that this pattern shows up pretty much everywhere in nature. So you could track the seasons. So sunrise is like spring, midday is like summer, sunsets like autumn, and midnight's like winter. You can look at it for like the waxing and waning moon. You can look at the female menstrual cycle. You can look at like an in-breath and an out-breath. You can look at the human life cycle even. So you can literally layer up all of these things. This pattern is followed in nature. And if we just think about like what we can learn from that. So like an oak tree, it has an acorn, a seed, it grows into a tree, it leaves, like it puts leaves on and it grows the acorns. And then in the autumn, it drops all those leaves and then it goes into a state of kind of stillness and hibernation until it happens again. So that's the cycle that we see all around us. And we don't do that as humans. We don't really follow that. We just expect this like linear growth. And when I think about regenerative and regeneration, it's got to be about that. It's got to be about designing with natural cycles, and it's got to be about observing these periods that require different energies, whether that's like growth or decay or rest or death. And we talked about this in the panel at UCL about how death is a prerequisite for life, and that when we're talking about regenerative, we can't really have that discussion unless we're talking about death, which is obviously we don't like talking about death because we're Western, awkward, modern humans who don't have a very good relationship with that kind of thing. But that's a very important thing, whether we're talking about businesses or people or anything. We're not very good at dealing with that. So
Yeah,
you've got kind of like hospicing modernity, that's a great book as well, which
I
talks.
really love that. I felt like that was a meditation we just went on with you, by the way. It was really amazing. And
I've got so much more. I had to like condense it.
good. I think we all need to hire Jessica Ferrow to sort us out. But I was thinking about business model design, which, we do, some of our work is spreadsheet based, and it's important that it should be. But it's quite funny. So we did a project with an energy company recently for solar and battery and EV installation, which I feel is the good work because it's removing fossil fuels and shifting towards renewables, and they're a good reliable firm. But there's 2 or 3 states only captured in the Excel spreadsheet. There is death, which is like one part of the business in the whole of the energy space that's basically dying and margins are dying and the whole thing's declining, which is the old way of getting your energy and so on. And then there's like birth of sort of new services, and then there's full sunshine in the model. That's all there is. It's sort of there's a bit of investment to get the thing to grow, and then it's running at full power and it's like powerful and delivering high profit. But that's all there is. So it's only touching probably on 3 of those 8 possible spaces. And frankly, on the death one, no one even wants to talk about death in business because it's too depressing and no one wants to be associated with it, and everyone's freaking out and terrified about decline. So it would be really interesting to think about how in something as almost unnatural as an Excel spreadsheet and a 5-year P&L and an EBIT, someone working out the EBITDA and the rate of return, all the things that have to happen in big companies or small companies or even tiny companies, how you could marry those 2 things up in a way that was informative and useful. And I don't know if anyone's done that.
There's, as you said that, but as Jessica was describing that pattern towards midnight and so on, I noted down that sort of like so capitalism generally, but companies are actively fighting for it to be endlessly at midday.
Exactly right.
It's kind of like must stay at midday.
Eternal
We don't want it
sunshine.
to be. We don't want it to be early morning. Even early afternoon is terrible, but you certainly don't want to get towards sunset, and nobody wants it to be midnight. So it must stay at midday. Um,
Absolutely.
but,
And like
but go on.
the same with like our culture is obsessed with productivity and focus, like midday, as you say, it's got to be summer, it's got to be midday. And if you map the human life cycle onto that as well, summer or south is like the kind of adolescence and youth, and then like basically again we're obsessed with youth, like just think of like celebrity culture and like elderhood, which is the north. Elderhood and midnight, elderhood is like completely overlooked, and
Mm.
not very good at like understanding wisdom and respecting wisdom, or like elderhood is just not a phase of life that we're very good at.
Right, back to your John Young story about sort of like where he got that knowledge and wisdom from. And the thing that I love best about the nature group here is that I said this to someone the other day. There are various pictures of different bits of the nature group hanging together on kind of like doing a planting or whatever else and so on. And you look at that group of people and you go, that's a weird group of people. But there's kind of like, you go, why are you all together from the old to the young to kind of like social housing to kind of like tenants to whatever else it can be? It's kind of like, it's a really lovely thing that these people are sharing and swapping knowledge and experience across generations just through this thing. That and so all of the thing that I wanted to come back to in the company thing was, you get sort of like the asset strippers and the restructurers and such have gone, so a
Yeah.
lot of this company used to be good at, now isn't. We have to keep it going keep it going somehow. What would it look like in a system to have a kind of like an active sector of company composters? To say that sort of like we will get you at sunset where you've got lots of value in your business, both socially and materially and whatever else, and let's actively compost it to make new things grow again, rather than persist within this endless kind of like, oh, the share prices go down again, and we have had to close these stores and do whatever else and so on. What does it take to actively compost so that new things might grow that do grow a lot, that do create the conditions that are conducive for life?
That's
Exactly.
really
Like
interesting.
we are just exhausted. Like we've been going at this like societal on a societal level, like since the Industrial Revolution. You can look on like a macro level of just like, and since particularly the 90s and like early 21st century, it's like we're here and we're just going up, 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 up. And there's like we're desperate for a rest. And that's what comes after the South is like the Southwest, the siesta. Like I feel like burnout and all of that stuff, like we're kind of like all of us are looking for ways to just like have a break, but we
I
don't,
like, yeah.
it's not acceptable. And so I think that's why there's loads of saunas now. And like
I really like that.
I
I
need a
really like
sauna that might help.
that idea, John, of like active. So having been in it, I was in working in advertising for a while, which was frankly advertising as it was is undergoing a gigantic sunset, willful or not, basically, because
Yeah.
of a bunch of reasons and fuck them. And one of the things that struck me was that I was in a firm that had been at high noon and then quite suddenly was really kind of heading towards dusk and is certainly quite dark now. But there was never really a willingness to accept, to speak of it in a way that was an acceptance that, right, what if we were to go to sort of go through the leftovers here and work out which bits can be turned into a really nice meal or which bits could plant your potato. And
Mm.
it's funny, it's not, but culturally unacceptable thing to talk about. And in fact, they just sort of hope to kind of keep it hanging on the vine as long as possible before it finally drops off.
Yeah. Well, and then it becomes someone else's problem. It's like
Yeah.
leadership moves through. It's kind of like the and it's now many years since I worked in the same industry, but it was kind of like it was the kind of like you could see the leadership pattern even back in like the noughties. It's kind of sort of like someone handing it to someone else, going like, "I've run this for 5 years and not fucked it up. There you go. Don't fuck it up," and then just hand it on to someone else, and it's persisted.
Can
Uh,
I'm conscious of our time, and I think we should try and get the group to chuck stuff in. But I wanted to throw one provocation in, which has been on my mind recently, and the source of a LinkedIn post this week, and other stuff we've been doing around. So here's the question. I'm going to work. Give me a minute to frame the question. I'll speak it, and then it'll come out. What would regenerative populism look like?
Is that the question?
Yeah, I think it
Like
is.
it's half-formed. Regenerative populism.
I'm thinking about a lot about the reason I'm saying it is I'm thinking a lot about how to work with aspects of patriotism and pride and locality and community and belonging, which are the reasons people are running towards some of these things, but also accepting the very real reality of what we're in and about to get a lot more of in this country, and how I just wanted to kind of collide those two ideas and see what came out.
I think it just all comes back to that kind of like well-being piece again. But I think it almost is the problem is it sounds a bit fluffy to say it like that, but it's like everyone's burned out. So it's like, how could this be the solution? Where it's more about like local. I think local community is a big thing as well. Of like, how do we relocalize? I think people need to wake up and realize that this global experiment is kind of, really creaking at the seams. And like, how do we relocalize? And how do we also, live in more in kind of respect of this nature's cycles? And how do we just connect more with nature?
Because I think that populism, and the way it's framed at the moment, is a recognition of we're all burned out and freaked out. It's just that the way in which they're choosing to look for solution is othering of outsiders, and but it comes from the same thing, which like my prospects do not, for me and my family, do not look good. Fucking hell. And it's really interesting to work with that energy and find a way to make it part of a regenerative mindset rather than just say they're all bastards.
I think that's it. At the end of the day, the only thing you can change is yourself and your own actions. You can wish that other people would change or other things would change, but you can't actually do anything about those things. The thing you can change is your own self and how you approach things. So I think, yeah, there's lots of amazing toolkits out there already. I mean, the other one, I mean, yeah, someone shared received shares about the John Young's Cornerstones connection. Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful model. I actually met John Young like 3 weeks ago in person, which was amazing because I've been like using his teachings for like 5 years, and I was like so excited to meet him in person. And this Cornerstones of Connections, really beautiful, how to build regenerative culture. And there's different ways that you can set up spaces that create a regenerative place, again, based on lots of indigenous wisdom. He's created, with Libby McNamara, he created a thing called Cultural Emergence, which is an amazing toolkit as well for building regenerative futures, which I'm sure lots of people here would be interested in. They have a really cool deck of cards called the Cultural Emergence Design Deck. And Luby also just released a book called Design Adventures, which is all about how to use this really interesting way of designing with like the design web, which is based on permaculture principles and regenerative principles. So that's just a few cool things to share. I'll put a few links in.
I'm going to invite the group then to come in. I've put the card deck in there already for my other card, the other card group.
Yeah, really great deck. Love the deck.
Thoughts? Speak. Raise hands, whatever you like.
I am.
Hello, Brett.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Will.
Hi, Will.
I had a great experience recently with regenerative, and kind of this is large scale. I was invited by Savills to go and visit a farm in Gloucestershire, which is 3,500 acres, farmed by a guy who's a bit younger than me, who I have massive life envy of, whose family have farmed it for 173 years. And he was saying that recently they've realized that the way that they farmed it 173 years ago was the right way to do it. And we went round the farm, but actually I was the only person who wasn't an asset manager on the tour. These were all people with big budgets, big investment funds. And this was a discussion about how this is a really good investment, this regenerative agriculture, and it's working at scale. So there were lots of graphs and spreadsheets, and what these spreadsheets were showing in comparison to a normal farm, organic is a totally different conversation that people don't really understand, I think. But we saw fields that weren't being ploughed, we saw cover crops, we saw safe strips of land where different animals were creating an ecosystem that meant they could manage the insects instead of insecticide, and the numbers added up. They weren't as productive in the long term as highly fertilized soil, but from a resilience perspective, in bad years, they were delivering a really good return. And these money men and women were there going, this is really interesting. And this is at scale. This is 3,500 acres. And they've connected to, I'll stop rambling in a second, but I was massively enthused by it because it's there and it's working. And at that end of the scale, it's industrial. And, insurance companies are paying him to plant trees to slow down water that would otherwise flood villages. And he's creating real kind of financial security around this. And I just thought it was it gave me some real optimism around dealing with it within the context of the capitalist system we live in.
That's super interesting. Was there, because it's called the Steps Collective, show the easy place to start. Did you get a sense of, was there something that made them look and go, why are we farming this wrong? Was there a kind of, did they tell the story of a moment, a happening, a thing?
I think having done it for such a long time, and they could see the trend downwards. They could see the kind of perennial increase in input cost, which is the fertilizers and the stuff, and the cyclical reduction in yields associated with that. And there were people trying it at scale. It's taken them 7 years is this magic number, right? I don't know if you've seen this incredible film called Little Big Farm or Big Little Farm or something, where they take over a plot of land. You should watch it. It's a brilliant hangover cure. It's a happy story. But 7 years is ultimately the time it takes to kind of turn around a farm. And there is a little bit of a dip, as you kind of migrate from the old to the new. But I think it's quite a big farm. So I think they probably had the money to kind of trial and migrate across, but it was fantastic to see. They weren't playing. It was big scale success. And this year, which was a really tricky year around the climate and water, they were delivering better returns than the farms that had short roots in the crops and had bad drainage and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I left feeling I wanted his life, actually.
Brilliant. Thank you, Will. Brett, I think you were going to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of throw in a few observations about the fact that, I mean, what we're talking about here, if you think of the context, is human activity, and human activity over the generations, the centuries, etc., has become, especially more and more in the modern era, industrialized. And that was all fine when human activity was basically driven by consuming, using up, degrading things that were plentiful and almost infinite, or considered to be infinite. And we're now in an era, some call it the Anthropocene, where human activity is now, so entrenched that it's redefining the natural processes of the planet, and we're at points where that doesn't work for the planet. And I like to characterize, capital markets and human activity as sort of finding ways to sort of consume or clear nature out the way for human progress, whereas the issue about regenerative practices versus so-called sustainable practices, actually what you want to try and do is find a way of working once again with nature and finding more equilibrium with nature, whether it's through industrial practices or otherwise, in such a way that you embrace the concept of clearing humans out of the way so that nature can actually work itself, because nature is in fact always was providing the processes that sustain the entire biosphere. And that's the challenge that modern sort of capitalism and industrial practices really need to seize. And unfortunately, we're living in a world where so much sort of convenience has been achieved through commerce that all those institutions are quite difficult to let go of, which is why the globe's the global energy system is still 80% propped up by fossil fuel in various guises, because while on the one hand we do understand and want to have a more regenerative, self-sustaining way of living, all the things and the ingenuity that human activity has applied that have got us here are what's actually continuing to sort of degrade the entire planet. And that's the battle and the challenge at the moment. But it is really encouraging, as Will rightly points out, that even now the money men are suddenly realizing that there are better, more genuinely regenerative ways of doing things, but it involves rewiring the agricultural practices and basically all industrial practices to allow nature back in again, to replenish the natural resources that capitalism has basically been drawing down and degrading. If we can get over that hurdle, perhaps we'll begin to see some sort of form of balance returning to the way the entire planet works.
That reminds me a lot of so Pins led a deep time walk for us a couple of weeks back.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the themes that came out of that was kind of like how quickly nature can come back with a space that is made for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've seen some of those stories down here in the Sussex Bay project. So trawling was stopped in 2021. But there was a report the other month that they were like massively surprised at just how fast the seabed is restoring and the species that are coming back. So if you can rewire, and maybe even rewire is the wrong metaphor, because you don't want to wire at all. You just kind of want to make the provision so that sort of like that space is there for nature to fill again. I'm conscious of 3 minutes. Any other thoughts from the group?
Lots of thoughts, but I'm not sure they'd fit in 3 minutes. And
170 characters.
in my usual spirits, I think I agree, or like I share a lot of what we've discussed, but there's also things that I kind of quite fundamentally don't share. I don't agree that we're all burnt out. I think some people are burnt out, for example, and I think that's quite important, is not to frame. Well, it's not to, it's both and. So I guess it's not exactly dissent. It's just a broader perspective.
That's good.
or a different one, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it feels like it contains that, but it's much bigger than that. And yeah, I think that, well, yeah, lots to say. And I think the regenerative pieces at scale is tricky. I think there is that. There's a whole piece on which, John, is closer to your area, on sort of material throughput and reducing consumption, that still in what's typically the West we don't want to talk about. We're still focusing on the production and not focusing in only, rather than focusing more on our own consumption. We've got enough material to go round. The problem is we don't share it and we waste it. And I just think we don't bring enough of that into the discussion still, because that's not change that we're necessarily willing to make, even though we can actually make it quite quickly. So I think there's lots of areas where I would like building out, but maybe that's just the nature of the discussion. You can't cover everything.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting, Pins. Thank you. So we're almost at the top of the hour. Leo and Jessica. Jessica's put her LinkedIn in. Please do connect if anybody wants to put theirs in as well. Leo and Jessica, I want to. I mean, selfishly, because I've got one. What's one thing you're taking away from this version of the conversation?
Oh.
And I can say what mine is to give you an extra 20
I'm being
seconds
kicked out
to
of the
think
room that I'm
about it.
in, so I can do that. Why doesn't Leo go first, and I'll just sort myself out.
All right, Leo. Or
What's sitting with me? I think this time round, I'm really thinking much more, and it helped to see Jessica do the kind of H Shields thing, much more about how, if you started with intent, I could bring it into almost every aspect of our business practice in one way or another, and that we could just add a new tab in an Excel spreadsheet would be moving the thinking on radically. And it isn't necessarily that difficult. I don't have to then solve some big abstract level definition of regenerative business design. I just need to actually change the Excel spreadsheet a bit that we do on our next project. Just one tiny thing and see what happens. So that makes it more practical for me.
nice. Mine is kind of similar. Because it came back to kind of like my initial gut reaction when the thing that you and Jessica and I had talked about before, like growing a potato in my garden and then eating it for lunch, sounds like a small, stupid story. And the gut reaction is kind of like, oh, that's just too stupid to say. But actually, I think we all need to lean into tell small stories more often to people. And almost the stupider the better. But just to sort of like, because it's guaranteed that other people will be thinking the same way. They're like, oh, I didn't think that thing that I did was important either. But now that you think that thing's important, maybe this thing that I do is important as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Jessica.
It's back.
She's
I'm
back.
back, and I'll make it super quick. Yeah, making progress visible. That's really good. That's one of the principles in the cultural emergence deck, actually. Yeah, I think it's just basically, regenerative. It's like sustainability plus nature. That's what I think. Intelligence from nature and connection with nature. That's what it is for me. And I think we're quite a long way off that being the case. So I think, anything you can do to bring nature more into the way you think or operate in your life or business feels like a good move.
I'm going to show something super quickly, which was at the Content Rising festival that was down at Wakehurst. So Farhana Yamin said this, another world is possible, said Arundhati Roy in 2003. I think it is here already, and it's your job to go and make it visible. So, to that end,
That's cool.
thank you everyone for joining the Sept Collective. Please come again. Thank you, Leo. Thank you, Jessica.
Good to see you again.
Go and make things visible this afternoon and tell stupid stories.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody.